Good afternoon, everyone. Bill Phillips here, the Prince George Daily News with our weekly PG Talks session. I have with me today Tracy Calogheros, Chuck Nisbett, and Mackenzie Kerr. Todd Corrigal spent some time on his job that actually pays him today for some reason, so he couldn't make it today. We'll start off this week with news out of City Hall that City Council has adopted or given first three readings to a bylaw that would basically allow them to clean up some of the homeless people downtown. Tracy, your thoughts on this move to get an injunction for the city to start going in and fining people for littering that are down there and cleaning people up, or not people, but cleaning the streets up.
Well, I don't know how you're finding someone that isn't currently homed. I mean, it's pretty tough to imagine that fines are going to make any real difference or even be something that someone could pay. I don't know that we can legislate ourselves out of what is clearly an intergenerational and social issue. And so this is not an area that I have spent any time with, so take my comments for what they're worth. But I do really think that there has to be a more wholesome approach to this, holistic, that finding someone and moving them off of the spot that they're staying. I understand the nuisance side of it, but I also understand the human side of it. And these individuals need help, not censure. And I don't know that you can bylaw your way around the fact that they need help. That's still going to be there, regardless of whether you've created an adversarial situation where people are now pointing fingers at each other and seeking court injunctions and RCMP intervention. I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it's going to work, and I don't think that it helps anybody.
Mm-hmm. Mackenzie, your thoughts? Empowering bylaw officers to go in and start cleaning up some of these camps. They actually have previously cleaned up some of these camps in the wooded areas around the city. Your thoughts on this approach from the city?
I think it's the exact opposite approach that we need to be taking. I attended the protest that we had not last night but the night before against these bylaw changes, and there was 50 to 80 people outside City Hall. We had tents for visuals, and we were hoping to have some conversations with the councillors. It was right before the city council meeting and we didn't hear from anyone. But we're against these bylaws, and me just saying we because I was just present to listen to the stories of the people that think this is the wrong approach. But the solutions are out there. They have a list of solutions, and we need a holistic wraparound approach. You can't require people to a lot of the shelters, people say just go in the shelters. A lot of the shelters require you to be dry, sober, not on drugs, and housing has to come first. How can you ask someone to try and get off drugs if they're on the street and just trying to survive? So, they don't have fresh drinking water. They don't have bathrooms available down there. There is a lot of things that we can do quickly and short term. And then we need to be looking at housing options. I've seen some articles in the newspaper about some of the alternatives that we could be looking at, tiny home communities, things that really give these people dignity. And they moved from, some of them moved from across the courthouse down to Fifth Avenue, and they're being kicked out of there too and being given eviction notices. And I'm not sure where they want them to go because they can't go anywhere. So it just seems like they're just pushing them out of the public eye more and more, just to make it, it look better aesthetically downtown. So I do think that we need to be listening to the people that work on the ground, the people that are working at the overdose prevention sites, and talking to the people that live downtown and asking them what they need, and not just, using bureaucratic excuses to use more bylaws and fine people that have no money.
Chuck, your thoughts on what we need to do with the issue downtown? And yeah, it is kind of tough. How do you find people that may be homeless, and where do you move these people to?
Yeah, it's a tough problem. I mean, I understand the need for them to find a place that they can stay and feel safe. and just have things, their own space, you know. But I can also understand the frustrations of the people that have businesses downtown and are not wanting people camped out right beside their stores or just down the street or on the streets. There's been encampments on the streets. Where I work, I deal with the bylaw officers quite a bit, and a few times a week they come in with truckloads of stuff that they've taken from these encampments and throw it into the garbage. And I know that they're frustrated and they want to find a way to stop this happening every day, you know? So there has to be a way to find a space. I mean, if we need to put up a permanent tent city for now, maybe that's what we need to do. There's space around town that can be designated, you know. Somehow we have to find the space to make available, and once we have that available, then we can start working towards providing more homes, more affordable housing, or you know, dropping housing even that will work for people who are ready to try and get off the street and get off drugs or whatever other problems they have, you know. I just feel like we're not quite looking at this the right way. I don't think you can go and find people who have nothing. That's not going to be effective. What it will end up with is a whole bunch more people in jail, which is not what we need at all. So I think they need to look at the way they're going about it and try and come at it from a different angle and find a more useful solution, you know, without making these people even more victimized than they are.
I agree with you, Chuck. And I think that it's important to recognize that there are some projects that are underway that will help to alleviate some of this, the project on First Avenue in particular, but it's not going to solve everything. And it's also not going to open tomorrow. And even the tiny house solutions and everything else take time to actually get them built. So the notion that we need to designate a spot in the community within range of where folks need to be able to get to for their support, I don't see another option other than that. And to me, that is the more humane approach. And I understand that both the Clately and other Indigenous communities were finding ways of supporting the individuals, Indigenous or non, who were living in these tent cities. And that's probably a better circle approach than fining and jailing. It's certainly better than jailing.
Don't we already have that now with where they're congregating just by Whittick there? Can City Council just designate that as a permanent location? It's kind of small in that, but the other question there, if we want to have a permanent location, a permanent homeless camp, where do we put it? Because nobody's going to want it next to them.
I think.
Go ahead, Mackenzie.
I just have a problem with the word permanent because it's going to be temporary, right? It's not like permanent being built into the ground that will be there forever. It's temporary. And so that's just the one thing that I wanted to add, but Tracy, you can go ahead with ideas of where it could be.
I don't know that I have an idea for where it can be, but it cannot be right in the heart of the downtown core. And I recognize that the individuals that are accessing services, most of those services are in that downtown core area. So there would need to be some conversation about how to provide those services at a different place. But I am sympathetic to the landowners and the business owners in the downtown that are trying to create a revitalized space that are bringing people back in. And right or wrong, there is a broad public idea out there that the downtown is dangerous. And I personally have never felt that about our downtown. And I've been hearing that narrative for 30 odd years that I've lived here, but it's a very real impediment to business. And so as we are trying to help these individuals change their lives and get off the streets, we also need to help the rest of the community understand that these people need empathy, not fingers pointed at them, and that there isn't necessarily danger associated with it, and that all of us are going to be happier and healthier and have a better experience in our community if we can help these individuals also achieve some sense of stability, and we're not going to do that the way we're at. But I don't think that we can put even a temporary tent city right in that downtown space. And so I think that there has to be give and take on both sides.
Well, go ahead, Chuck.
Well, I was just thinking, there's a couple areas that I can think of that are close to downtown, but not directly downtown. I mean, if you go down onto River Road, there is park space that could be designated. There's land down by the old La Paz lumber area that could be used, which is, it's a little ways from downtown. It's going to be a trek to get up and across the bridge and down to downtown, but it's better than nothing, I think. And that might be able to, for a long-term tent city, that might be a usable space. Also, I think rather than having bylaw officers running around and handing out tickets, increase the RCMP presence throughout this. Let them walk through, get to know the people, talk to the people. I mean, I know a lot of RCMP officers, and there are a lot of good people there that can deal with this stuff, and without going off and mass raids and dragging people left, right, and center. You just need to trust in the powers that you have and let them deal with it in a smart way. I think that this could, if it's done properly, it can be effective and come up with the solution we eventually want, which is more people off the street moved into a long-term housing situation that they can afford, but it's just, you've got to go about it the right way. Don't start slapping tickets at people and fines. It's not going to work that way.
Yeah, we've seen in, I believe it was, I want to say Vernon and somewhere else, I forget, Andrew Curiata said on his Twitter, though, that there was some communities that were fining people and it didn't work at all. This type of bylaw change doesn't work. And we've seen that be proven. And, they were downtown in front of the regional district building a couple months ago, and then they were moved. They were evicted and they had to move. And so they're just trying to find spaces that they're able to stay. And then now they're across from the courthouse, and a bunch of them are moving over to Fifth Avenue at the very end, where it's just brush and there's no buildings right next to them. And they're being evicted from there as well. So, that is out of sight and close enough for them to walk to get their services. If we're pushing them, a 2-mile walk away from the overdose prevention site, we're going to see a spike in overdose deaths. We can't be pushing them. And I don't think that our CMP presence increasing would be the solution either. I think we need to be, having the people that are working on the ground with them, close to them the most. And the trust is broken between them and the RCMP when all of their belongings are stolen every day. So I personally believe that we need a different approach than that.
Yeah, there's a bit of a dichotomy there. I know a lot of downtown businesses would, over the years have talked about it, just kind of be nice to move all that out. And they complain that one of the reasons a lot of the homeless are downtown is all the services are there. The dichotomy is that if you move all the services out, all the homeless will leave. But then we have a real hole downtown, because that's why a lot of the downtown is full. We have all these people working in different service agencies that work downtown. So it's kind of funny sometimes where, it's such a difficult thing. And just simply moving the homeless out without the access to services actually creates a bigger problem. I think that's why the homeless congregate there. And those services are there for a reason.
I think it's this idea that the homeless are an other, as opposed to thinking of them as us, as part of our community, as our neighbors. There's services downtown for all sorts of things. So, there's services for teen mental health, there's services, pharmacies, there's doctors, there's physio, there's all kinds of services downtown. Some of them are overdose prevention and food banks. But these individuals they're our neighbors, they're our family members, they're our friends, they're our coworkers in some cases. These are people who there, but by the grace of God go I, is the statement. I think that we need to stop thinking of all members of our society as something separate and distinct from us. If we have learned anything from COVID, it's that we are all inextricably intertwined and that our physiology is identical. So if we could stop thinking of this as an outside problem and it being a family table problem, I think we'd come a lot further.
Mackenzie?
I think that it would be really great if there was a program where people could, spend a couple hours walking around through a type of program that I don't know exists in Prince George to meet people, meet our fellow community members that have somehow ended up living without homes downtown, to humanize them. And I think that if we could do that as a large community, we could have, the people that are making the decisions going downtown, the people that are, not wanting to, business owners, people that are affected by the things that are happening, meeting them. And we had people speaking at the rally 2 days ago that live downtown sharing their stories, but no one was there. No one that was impacted or making the decisions was there, and they were sharing their stories then. So we need to somehow, bring people together so that it's humanized and not just keep talking about them as an other, because I think that that's step one. They were talking about the other day, you have to change internally before we can change as a society. You have to accept that these people are your community members as well, first at your kitchen table, before we are able to change in the community. So I think that that would be an amazing program that I wish we could start. I know that in Vancouver and Victoria, there's something similar. A not-for-profit has started doing those things, but I just don't think it's here yet. And I think that that could be step one. I mean, long-term, but a solution.
Yeah, you know that our mayor does that. He walks George Street all the time in the weather that allows it, and sits and has coffee and talks to folks from all walks of life. And I know it to be true because I've sat and had that coffee with him on the bench on George Street and had lots of folks in various socioeconomic situations stop to chat and talk about what's going on in the city and what's going on in their lives. And he's wide open to it. I haven't seen the evidence of that from our other counselors, but I suspect that there are others amongst the group, folks like Murray or Corey, that have been working with the people downtown for years. So that we do have that happening at council. I'm not sure what happened with this bylaw or where we're at and how we got to this point where it feels adversarial, because I know there's support in the decision-making tables.
Yeah, and I was thinking as a public as well, to do that, because we don't have like a public program for doing that. It's just kind of out of their own will to walk downtown and feel safe.
Yeah, I know Brian Skaken did that too. He did a Facebook post a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and he just walked up and he took a bunch of pictures of actual other people there and talked to them and that kind of.
He also voted for this bylaw though.
Yeah, I'm saying I'm kind of surprised where this bylaw came from, because I think there was enough people on city council that really didn't want to go down this road, but somehow we are. And Mackenzie, you were talking about programs. There was one a few years ago where they would take people from the community, usually community leaders. I know we had reporters do them, and they spend the night on the street. Just so it gives you an idea of how hard it is to spend a night outdoors downtown, and how frightening it is, and trying to find heat. I think they usually did it. They didn't do it at this time of year when it's nice and warm out either. It's like October or something like that. So it's just an isolated program, and it doesn't give wide education. But if for the people who went on it, certainly you understand what it's like, right? And that's part of it.
Yeah, I know members of the some of the reporters at the Citizen took part in that program.
Yeah.
And we had some interesting discussions afterwards about what it was like, and just how difficult it is to stay warm. And I think the one time it was like late October, early November, something like that. And just the ability to stay warm when it wasn't even that cold yet, and try to get comfortable and sleep through a night. And then the results of not being able to sleep properly and being up and at it again as soon as things start moving in the morning, 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, people are moving around and you've got to go and clean up your house and take off again and try and keep foraging for the day. It's a tough grind, and it does a lot to a person. It really wears them down fast. But I don't think anything actually came from that. There were a spate of stories and a couple of features that we did and things, but it just all died down again. And I think people need to really revisit that whole thing and look at what life really is like on the street, and what it would take to make it possible to survive and then move beyond living on the street. You know, I mean, it's not a quick fix. Nothing is going to be quick about this at all. It's going to take time, and it's going to take patience and cooperation from everybody involved, especially the landholders and business owners downtown. Everybody's got to realize that it's going to take some time to fix this problem. You can't just walk in and go, this is it. You get a ticket and you got to get off the street. It's not going to go. So, yeah, it's got to be in for the long haul. Let's make this something that's going to take some time and get it right. You know, there are ways about it, but even the things that are on the way already, like Tracy said, they're going to take a while before the supplemental housing is finished, and you know, they need to be working towards that now, working towards getting people ready to be able to take advantage of that. You know, maybe if they move to a spot further down Fifth Avenue, like Mackenzie was saying, where it's quiet and there's not people around, maybe move some of those agency offices down that way too. There's open buildings down that way as well, you know, and you could bring in a storefront where people could go in and do their storage there instead of over on Dominion and or George, and you know, maybe we could move that and start getting the infrastructure in place to moving people out of the downtown area.
Mackenzie, you were.
Yeah, I think one of the tangible benefits that you would see from doing a walkthrough or a sleeping overnight, or the public perception change, the purpose of that public perception change would be so that they can stay where they are and people are not scared wanting to push them away. Because if people know that they're not scary, then they won't have to move, right? It's like this public perception that they're scary. So I think that can be one of the tangible benefits. But I wish that maybe next week we could have, one of a guest speaker of one of the people that is organizing, standing up against these bylaws and getting into the nitty gritty of how they came about and what the asks are, and the people that are working closely with these communities, because they have these solutions already. They're just not being heard. So I think that if they had some time to come in and chat with people on this platform, then that would be beneficial as well. I can get you a contact if you want, Bill.
Sure, that would be awesome. Or Tracy, are we focusing too much on the city? Because when it comes down to it, really, the city has very little control over what services are provided to people who need them here in this community. Has very little control over housing. In some ways, they're kind of between a rock and a hard place, because everybody focuses on the city. Of course, they're the most accessible. Good luck getting a hold of a minister to come down here and talk to anybody about it. Are we too angry at the citizen? At the citizen, of course. Freudian slip.
Freudian slip there, Bill.
I know. Are we too angry at the city?
I get where you're going with this. Absolutely, this is not an issue that's going to be solved by a single level of government. And it can't be solved only by government, but it has to be solved as a community. And so I think that involves Indigenous government, it involves regional districts, city, province, federal government, but it also involves individual people involved in the parties themselves, individual people who might run for city council. We elect a leadership and expect them to solve everything without ever recognizing that the folks we've elected aren't experts on everything. And so, I'm all over the map here. You can't solve a social problem with a political fix. And I think that the social problem that we're facing here, it's a healthcare issue. This is intergenerational trauma in Indigenous communities stemming from colonization and residential schools. And the fallout is that an individual winds up on Dominion getting a ticket from the city because they don't have anywhere else to go. So that is such a narrow view of the problem. And that's really the place where the city has the most control. Though I will say that it is the city that has led the way on finding the funding and the land and amalgamating it all for this major project on First Avenue that I believe actually will have an impact on this down the road. And so we're mad at the city for a variety of reasons, and yet the city has actually been doing work on this file for 20 years. No, it's not fixed, but they can't fix it alone. And we're only just now starting to have a real national conversation about what true reconciliation means and what intergenerational trauma really is. And then there's all the other reasons that people wind up on the street or addicted to whatever it is they're addicted to that have nothing to do with being Indigenous. There's lots of non-Indigenous people in exactly the same situation. So it's not reasonable for anyone to expect the city of Prince George to solve the issue of homelessness and addiction in isolation, not even just for their own downtown. This is a societal discussion. And I think we've been having this discussion more in the last 18 months than I've ever heard in my adult life. And so I'm hopeful that we're going to start to find some of these solutions over the next 18 months. But that doesn't solve the problem for the individual propped up against the wall on Dominion Street facing a bylaw officer. And so this adversarial approach that I think has grown up over the last 5 or 6 years, we've got to set it aside, and we have to stop pointing fingers and issuing tickets and screaming at each other on Facebook comment feeds so that we can actually maybe try and heal as a collective community and move forward into a future that is limitless. If we actually tap all of the human capital that's out there instead of writing off entire groups of people based on ethnicity or socioeconomic reality, we can do anything. I believe we can solve a lot of these problems, but everybody's so mad at everybody else right now, you can't get there.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, is that, you know, there is a certain segment in town that basically wants City Hall or someone to go down there with a big, you know, a wagon and throw everybody in the back and take them somewhere, and they don't really care where. And that's not a solution. That doesn't solve anything. But there is that segment that they'd be happy if that's what happened, if it's out of sight, out of mind. So I think you're right.
Did it.
What's that?
Even if they did it.
Yeah.
Go down, round everybody up, take everything off the street, put them all in jail. Tomorrow, new people arrive in exactly the same situation. And what are you going to do? Keep putting everybody in jail? Then the same folks that want us to round everyone up is going to be mad that we're spending too much money rounding people up. Like this doesn't get solved this way.
Yeah.
The old George Carlin skit, you know, round everyone up, put them on an island, and don't worry about them, you know. That's from way back when. But yeah, it just doesn't work. There's no way to do it. You know, you need to have a plan that needs to be put forward through all the agencies that are involved, especially the health agencies, because that's what, I wouldn't say 90%, but a large part of this is a health issue that needs to be dealt with. And whether it be drugs or trauma from intergenerational abuse, it doesn't matter. It all comes down to health, mental health, and it can be dealt with those agencies, giving them the appropriate resources they need to help. You know, they've got to have the power to do it. And, you know, they've got to have the manpower to do it too. So, yeah, once again, it's not going to be a quick fix, but it's something that has to be done, and it has to be done systematically all the way through, not just a quick fix and try and push them off this way or push them off that way. Let's try and get the people in there that can help them to get where they need to be.
And in response to George Carlin's skit, I would argue that we are all on an island, and it's called Earth.
That's very true. Actually, it may not have been Carlin. Might have been Bill Cosby. Not sure which, but I remember it from way back.
And that's got its own raft of problems there.
We're treading on dangerous territory now. there you go. Yeah, I lost my train of thought. So Mackenzie, how do we get the community involved in a better discussion about this issue, rather than, like we talked about, the Facebook feeds, and I think we've talked about trying to do this on various issues. So how do we get people more involved?
Well, I mean, you can attend the rallies that people are having so that you can meet the people that live downtown and hear them share their stories and share what they need. They need bathrooms and water, and to not be packed up and moved every day at 3 a.m. And we need to, you know, listen to the people that are working with them and the people that are running these social services, because they have been telling us the solutions for a while, and we can demand that our politicians do not create more harm by bringing in bylaws like fining people who have no money.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like Tracy said, you can't legislate a social issue, a resolve to a social issue. Right?
And it passed, right? So it was a tie, and I was trying to watch the city council meeting, but it's really hard. It's very inaccessible right now during COVID, because you can't go in and sit in because of COVID, even with masks on, which I find funny because we all have masks on. And you can actually have gatherings of up to 50 people inside with masks on, but they won't let any people inside City Hall. So we were streaming it on a projector on the wall of City Hall so that the people could see what the results were. And you can't even see who's putting up their hands because the screen zooms out when they vote. And so you can't even see it so far away. Like, it really is impeding the democratic process for things like this. And, you know, we were all outside, and you have to email or send in your if you're upset with a bylaw change or whatever's on the agenda, you have to email in. Well, that's really hard for someone that lives on the street that is trying to share their dismay outside with a poster, and they can't send an email or watch the screening of the meeting online, right? So we have to bring the people together and listen to the people that have been sharing the solutions. I mean, long-term solutions would be decriminalizing drugs, because we're creating an unsafe supply. But that's like long-term, just like housing. Short-term, we need to talk to the people, and hopefully next week we can have someone on, talk to the people that have been sharing the solutions. And there's, you know, a Facebook page of the people that are working towards these issues and trying to share when the rallies are as much as possible so that people can come and listen. But yeah, I mean, it's complex, but we need to be trying to create the least amount of harm as possible, and bringing forward these bylaws was the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like I said, these bylaws came out of nowhere for me, anyways. Speaking of coming out of nowhere, we're gonna. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't know that they're out of nowhere. I think if Todd was able to be here with us today, that he would be speaking to the push coming out of chamber members and business owners and the problems and the concerns. And I mean, this isn't a new issue. It didn't just erupt during COVID or even since the wildfires. There have been issues downtown with the homeless population for years. And
yeah.
I think that we've covered all the reasons why a lot of the accusations are unfair and unfounded and could have been dealt with 30 years ago. But if I'm just a business owner and I'm trying to run my retail front of house, and I have a campsite right next to me or in front of me, as a business owner, I can see the challenge there. And so that's where all of the educational pieces we've talked about are important. But I don't think that this bylaw came out of nowhere. It may not have been publicly discussed a whole lot, but I've heard Todd talk about similar concerns, and I've definitely seen it in the business community and from folks that have chatted about it informally, about wanting something done and wanting the city to step up and wanting the camps removed. So it isn't a new issue. It's just not being dealt with in a way that I think is going to have the impacts they're hoping.
Yeah, poor phrasing. It didn't come out of nowhere. This issue's been around for a long time. I think what I was trying to get at is that I was surprised that the city took this tack. I thought that they would take a different approach when this comes forward. So yeah, and I think Mackenzie suggested that part of it is that it come quickly, like it's all of a sudden it's on the agenda. And here we are, and then they're voting on it, right? And that's the city, the council or city or wherever this came from, kind of spraying this on the community without much discussion about going down this road prior to election. But yeah, you're right. This has been around for ever since I've been in this city. This has been an issue. It's probably, it seems to be getting worse now. There's more people, and the city outlined the number of calls they've had over the last 3 or 4 years, and it's increased dramatically for the number of calls down there. So yeah, there's nothing new, and certainly, and I'm the same. I can appreciate the business concerns, and like you say, you have a business, a storefront downtown, and you got to sweep needles away from the door front in the morning so you can get your customers in. That's a tough road to go down. So
Can I just quickly add one thing, Bill?
Yeah.
Councillor Ramsey asked by law at the city council meeting on Monday how many calls there has been to the homeless camp across from the courthouse, and there's been 0. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I didn't see that.
Working down at the Citizen in the press room, the press room is definitely not like a storefront business. It has a big back alley behind it, and it was a great place for the homeless to set up little camps amongst all our newspaper boxes and stuff. But every Monday, first thing we used to do is go out back and clean up all the needles and refuse and whatever else was left out there. And it became the first priority we had every Monday was to go and do this. And, you've got to realize it's not just the storefronts. It's the other businesses that have, loading docks in back and stuff and things like that, where there are spaces where people are setting up. But it becomes frustrating, really, really frustrating for everybody. And I understand that because I know how frustrated we were. We were, very upset every time we had to do this. But we also knew that it wasn't just something that we could just, expect to go away, or just figure if they just came along with the police came along and moved everyone along, it's all going to be good. We had long discussions, and let me tell you, pressmen have a lot of hours where they spend a lot of time talking about everything. And we would discuss what needed to be done. And the bunch of us couldn't come up with a reasonable plan, but we all realized that it was a lot more than just moving in and moving people off. Setting up, accessible bathrooms and things, and storage and things like that, water. It all has to be done to make this a viable project, right? To move people into a space that's going to be away so that they're not a nuisance factor, right? That's the thing that is bothering people downtown, the nuisance factor. So you need to be able to get people into a spot where you reduce that nuisance factor, that they can stay until the bigger projects are completed and ready for them. And when we can move people into better situations as they're ready and as the situations become available.
Another part of this we're talking about cleaning up needles and that kind of stuff is the safe injection site. I guess is it adequate downtown? I don't know these things, but yeah, I guess that's some of the questions that have to be asked of our city. Is it adequate? And same as cleaning up, as we talked earlier about. There's the same people that want all the homeless just packed up and cleared it off somewhere. They point the finger at the safe injection site as, or the needle exchange. It's not really safe injection site, as part of the problem. Is that working? That's one of the issues we hear from virtually everybody down not only downtown, is the number of needles all over the place. So does that work? Do we need more? I don't know. What's the solution?
Model works. There's been 0 ODs at safe injection sites. And so if our goal here is to treat this as a health issue, then the safe injection sites are performing the function that they were set up for. They're keeping people safer. The needle issue, I think, is a larger piece of this whole social issue that we're talking about. And so we have pushed the responsibility for providing healthcare onto the surface, onto the nonprofit services in our communities, whose resources are extraordinarily limited. So the resources they do have is being triaged, and they're applying those resources to saving lives. Picking up the needles falls by the wayside because that's not keeping a person alive, and they don't have the money to hire the staff to go out and deal with the needles. And exchanging one for one becomes a barrier to the individual that is the user. And the focus of the safe injection site is on the health and well-being of the user. So again, as a community, we need to look at how we want to provide these medical services. The province is responsible for healthcare. So I think healthcare as a whole needs to re-examine their role in addiction. And the federal government has a role to play in that, whether the feds and the provinces want to play silly bugger with jurisdictional issues or not. That's what's getting in the way, are these independent silos, and then the expensive piece, which is hiring labor that's skilled and protected to go out and pick up these needles. No one's paying for it. So then I wind up hiring summer students that are going to run a summer camp in Clayton Memorial Park, and I'm expecting them to go out and pick up needles. It makes no sense. So it is a holistic issue, I think.
Yeah. Mackenzie?
Yeah, I can't remember if it's provincial or federal, but I think it's provincial, that the addictions ministry is the lowest funded ministry out of every ministry in the whole province. Like it, how does that make any sense? Yeah.
It isn't just Indigenous people that are the victims of systemic racism. And I think that the kind of systemic bigotry around addiction and mental health is on full display in those funding levels and in who gets assigned to do that work and how it gets paid for and what taxpayers are willing to accept in terms of expenses.
But that said, I think that taxpayers need to be educated to understand what effect this is having on their city and their lives. I mean, people need to know, they need to see it up close and personal. This is where the journalists and photojournalists come in, go in, show it, show people what it's all about, show them what life's like on the street, let people know what it takes to get through life like that and what brings you there and why you can't get back out. I think education is the key right now. You need to show everybody what it's all about, and then people will understand and be prepared to back an initiative where more money is going towards support and other services that are needed. But you can't do it with people who don't know. You've got to educate the masses.
And I think another solution could be showing that it costs us more to have someone living on the street than it would to solve the issue from the root cause. And I think that if people, some people think only in money terms. And so if we can show them that it's way cheaper to solve the issue than fining people and paying bylaw officers to arrest people, then maybe that could be a solution as well, as to show them the money.
Exactly. We just have a few minutes left, so we'll switch topics a little bit here because we wanted to talk about another issue, and we'll put Mackenzie on the spot for this one. Is the foo-for-all with the federal Green Party, where Jennifer Atwin, I think was her name, MP. She crossed the floor to the Liberals, ostensibly over her position or non-position on the Israel-Palestine conflict. And now the long knives are coming out for Annamie Paul, the new leader, who they could force a non-confidence motion in her leadership, apparently. So we'll go to Mackenzie to find out what the heck is going on with the Green Party.
Oh, I wish I knew. I'm pretty far away from all the action, so I'm not totally sure. But I do know that there is, a group of people that are pretty unhappy that Annamie treated Jenica the way that she did, and they're pretty unhappy that Jenica decided to go Liberal and not independent. It seems like she's trying to make sure that she keeps her seat. A lot of people are confused as to why she didn't go NDP, because they see it as closer, but there's actually no NDP in her province that has gotten any seats. So it would be a waste. But I personally think that she could have won independent, and that's what she should have done. But who knows? We're seeing her backpedaling on her statements about Israel-Palestine now that she's part of the Liberals. So people were pretty disappointed in that a couple of days after that all went down. So, I mean, I don't know other than that, other than we'll see what happens. The non-confidence or call for a different leadership is coming from some of the membership. So we'll see if that has enough support to be passed, and we might be having another leadership election, but I'm not sure. Of course, I'm a little bit disappointed in Enemy's stance on the Israel-Palestine issue because she is Jewish, and so it's very complex for her, which I understand. But I was very happy with Jenica Atwin's opinion on or her statement, I suppose, on the issue, and so I was disappointed to see her flipping her direction. And she loosened or made her words more gentle in her most recent statement when she joined the Liberals a couple days later. So honestly, I'm not sure. People cross the floor. NDPers also don't take floor crossers. It's in their constitution. So she couldn't have even if there was NDP in her province, which is something that I didn't know because they don't take floor crossers. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and I'm quite far away, but I'm, listening in, but that's about the point that I'm at. And hopefully we can get it all sorted out and, move forward, because there's bigger things that the Greens stand for than, trying to deal with our internal conflicts. Like there's we need to be solving these large issues in our community right now and sticking to our values. And right now it just seems that we're spending a lot of time with these internal conflicts and in the news in bad ways because of our internal conflicts, not good ways. And there's important issues that the Greens stand for that aren't being talked about because we're having internal issues. So hopefully we can sort them out soon and we can get back on track to the issues that need to be talked about, that the Greens are always pushing forward. So yeah, that's kind of a little update on what I know on that issue.
So running the risk of sounding partisan, you talked a lot during the election about Greens not whipping the vote, and that being one of the main reasons that people should vote Green, because the Green Party welcomes independent thinkers and differing opinions. How does this play into that?
Yeah, I'm just sounding like that because I don't know anything else. So I was just stating what I knew. But yeah, I mean, it's funny that she left because we don't whip votes. And so, but the issue, the reason that I suppose that she wasn't allowed to have a different opinion on this stance was because Annemie didn't like it. And so she wasn't letting Jenica have that view. There was threats to not let her run again if she kept her view on Palestine and spoke up like that. And there was a lot of fighting because of that. So that was why Jenica left. But I'm just surprised that she left to the Liberals when she could have gone independent and kept her views, right? Because the Liberals do have whipped votes on most issues, right? So I was very surprised that she went from a non-whipped party to a whipped party in general, not in every vote, but in general. So yeah, I mean, the whole point of the Green Party is that you're allowed to have your own views on issues that aren't the core values issues, the 6 core values that we have globally. So I mean, that's why I'm just like surprised, and I'm not really sure what to take of it because that's all the info I know. They're not really sharing anything. So
yeah, I haven't heard anything from the Liberal Party either, but it struck me as flying in the face of everything that you've ever.
Yeah. Oh, I think you just
lost Tracy.
Yeah, we just lost her here as well.
Oh, well, Chuck, you want to weigh in on this? So we'll see if Tracy can get reconnected.
Well, from what I know of this, which is not a heck of a lot, but it seems odd that the party came down so hard on Jenica Atwin. I always thought the whole idea was that she was allowed to have her own way of thinking, and that's what the party was. A lot of what the party was about, and this goes so against it. I'm surprised that there hasn't already been a push for a non-confidence vote against the leader, and I would expect sometime soon that things are going to erupt in the Green Party, and there's going to have to be some changes made. I really don't see how they can keep on with the same stance that they've had over the years, and which has brought them to where they are now, which is definitely a growing party, and then suddenly have this change in internal policies that just doesn't seem to fit. Um, a change that was strong enough to push someone to pull out of the party and move over to the Liberals. It just seems like there's a lot of internal conflict going on there, and something is going to have to be done. I don't see it continuing the same as it is. I really don't. And I'm trying to think of the leader's name, but it's losing it in my head right now.
Enemy Paul.
Yeah, Paul. Yeah. I think she's in trouble. I really do. I don't think she's got control of the party the way it has been. And I think that a leadership vote is going to have to happen.
Are these growing pains for the party, Mackenzie, or is this spelling, some? Could this be a rift that really could do some damage to the party?
Yeah, I think that it's. Yeah, I mean, I hope that it doesn't do damage. I mean, we've lost an MP, so that's damage already.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hoping that we can get over it and we can, figure our issues out internally so that we can get back on track to, creating platforms and policy and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think just internal struggles, they can happen anywhere. And I think that there's just a lot of highlight right now on us because they've been happening. And, there was Annemie Paul's comms guy, that he was the one that was pro-Israel and tweeted or Facebook posted about it. And, he was underneath Annemie Paul. And so that's where a lot of that came from because we're torn within the party on this issue. And so, I mean, people are allowed to have their own opinions in the party, but we have to figure out a way that we can make sure that human rights are not the ones that we're wavering on, right? So yeah, it's tough. We have to follow our 6 core values and we don't whip votes, but if it's not following that, we just have to figure out how to deal with this issue. And I mean, I'm not on the federal council or anything like that, so I'm watching from afar, really, but I'm just hoping that they can get it figured out so that we can be supporting candidates, because this also harms candidates and representatives in different areas around the country because they're being asked about it, like myself, and they have no idea what's actually going on internally. So now we're focused more on answering these questions, which are important to figure out, but we're not equipped to know the answers to them because they're not really sharing. And so it's really a hindrance to people that they're trying to support, candidates across the country, by now having them to have to deal with responding to these questions and not knowing, not being briefed on what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, that brings us up to about our time, but we'll do a quick, want to do a quick plug for something before we go, Chuck?
Well, yeah, as always, it's going to be a really nice week. It's going to be a lot of people on bikes out. So just be careful there with that. And just as you cruise through downtown, take a look around, see what's happening. Okay, it may bother you, but just try to look at it from a different point of view. Look at it a little bit from what drives a person to living on the street, and how hard it would be to pull yourself up from that position. I mean, it could be any one of us. Most Canadians live less than a month's pay away from doing the same thing. So just remember, it could be any of us easily. And I know a lot of people have felt the sting through COVID of what it's like not to have that extra cash to fall back on. And maybe we just need to think about that a little bit more.
I don't know. Mackenzie, plug before we leave.
No upcoming events that I can think of, but stay in the loop on the news channels to see when we're having rallies on important events in the community, and attend so that you can learn about the things that are happening in your community. Listen in. If they're listening to this live, they're probably already interested in current events and things that are happening and passionate about change. But encourage the people that don't watch these news lives to learn about what's happening and talk about solutions and humanize the people that are living downtown. And enjoy the farmers market this weekend. Stay safe camping, and make sure you put your fires out completely when you're camping, because wildfire season is coming soon.
Absolutely. And I'd like to thank Chuck and Mackenzie and Tracy, who we lost due to internet issues, for joining us, and for everyone who tuned in, whether for a couple minutes or for the whole hour to watch us. We certainly do appreciate it, and we will see you again next week.